All right, so I don't know who I'm on. I'm just going to start with Sean. I don't know if I already started with you. Who cares? But for segment 3, we're talking about the OSR versus modern RPG. So right off the bat, let's just dive into it. In what ways do OSR games differ fundamentally from the more modern type of RPG?
Well, we touched on it earlier. It's a philosophy of play, really. We talked about dungeon crawls, the expectation of death and destruction and dismemberment versus the superhero play. I mean, I'm talking through a D&D lens. Obviously, there are other games that don't necessarily adhere to that, but for D&D, you're playing a fantasy superhero, right? And a lot of players come in with the expectation that that's going to be it. They're going to play the high fantasy. They're going to be Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. They're going to make it through the epic story and be a hero. And like even 5e is, I think, designed deliberately around this quick advancement. The campaign is going to last a year, and you're going to go from level 1 to 20 in that year. Whereas in the old school, you are, well, you're playing the life of your character over several years. You could play for 4 years and still might not make it past level 6 or 7. So there's that more slow burn. But yeah, it's a philosophy of play, really.
You almost raised my ire for a moment because you said something in there. That was like, that's how I like to play. Actually, I use that as the example. I am absolutely looking for the Hickman Manifesto style of play, the Dragonlance Adventures, the Lord of the Rings. But my caveat is always characters can die. If my character dies, so be it. It's time to move on, and hopefully I didn't destroy the world in the process, but also I want it to happen exactly as you said. I want it to happen over years. I don't want a 3-month campaign where all of a sudden I started as a nobody and zipped all the way through the levels. I can't know all my abilities, understand what the hell it is my character is supposed to do if I do it. Remember, it is a game still, folks. But how you finish that, though, I'm in complete agreement with you.
And well, there's more to it. Like you say, the design, the modern, the like I've got some 5e stuff on here, and the adventures are a predetermined arc, and they even tell you use milestone leveling. Your characters get to this level, they all advance a level, right? And so it's not about what you earned, it's just, I showed up and played. Whereas, and that has become an expectation, at least in the people I've played 5e with, not the ones I run, but whereas in old school, it's like, no, you're told flat out, well, you go to the dungeon, and even if you survive, you don't haul out a bunch of loot, you're not leveling. Your XP is going to be minimal, and so you might have to get smart. You might have to go back. Could take a few sessions before you even get one level, as opposed to, you're going to level one level for every session you play, which is Adventurers League rule. If you play 5 sessions, you're level 5, and then it becomes 2 per session or something like that. I was reading over the rules, and it's like, ugh.
I say this all the time, and I'm serious. I've got to go find the book that it's in. I know it's one of them behind me somewhere, where it says you should gain a level every 3 to 5 adventures, and an adventure can last over multiple sessions. And I really think that's a good rule of thumb. Not that you have to do that exactly, but it's a good rule of thumb. Got to read a super chat just popped in here. Squirrel Hermit for $60 pops in. That's $60. We're 20 cents short, but no, we're not. No, we're not because
you got that Australian $2.
We had a Rumble rant on the Rumble side, so no, we're not short at all. Which is funny because we're actually at the YouTube showed me $99.80. But thank you, Squirrel Hermit, very much for the $60. He says giveaway has out. We will have a giveaway during segment 5 after we kick the basic expert out of here. I mean, what?
Okay, he's a nice guy. So yeah, and I think for me that's what I've seen the most in terms of the differences is the expectation of what the experience is going to be.
Okay. How do OSR gamers typically approach problem solving and decision making compared to modern RPG gamers?
Ooh, well, I'm just trying to think of my
again
group.
This, by the way, this is using your experience. We understand that this isn't 100% across the board.
Well, a lot of the guys I play with, my AD&D game, they're all older than me. They're in their mid-60s, and so it's kind of funny. But they will I've had to sort of coach them because they went from negotiating with the DM. As their previous DM would do this, they would negotiate and they would sit and play with the rules, and like they would spend a half an hour looking up a rule, say, okay, can I do this? And there was a little bit of sort of the preemptive asking of questions. It's like, what will happen if I do this? And their previous DM would enable that, whereas I'd be like, well, go ahead and try it. We'll see what happens. Right. So they had a sort of a probative approach, and I've seen that as well with other older gamers. I can't say, I don't know if that experience is common of other people's, but I've seen a lot of that. They're sort of trying to negotiate the outcome as opposed to just play the fucking game, make a choice, and let's see what happens.
Right. Okay. Not I said Malachi because you reminded me of our Palladium game. Cody knows what I'm talking about. Like, just make a choice and see what happens. I meant to say, hey, Cody. Questions for you now. In what ways do OSR games differ fundamentally from modern RPGs?
Well, the thing about it is that a lot of these OSR games are modern games now. There's so many OSR games now that I would argue that like it is part of the modern mentality now.
Okay.
But at its core, though, originally the OSR, like we were talking about before, had a very specific philosophy, which we already discussed. And I think it's worth looking into that philosophy, even if you don't use it. I think it's also worth looking into the original, like Basic Expert did with his game, like me and him have discussed, is going back to the source and looking at how these games were supposed to be played, and don't write a rule off. Like a lot of people that look at, like, for example, AD&D First Edition, and they look at the training rules and they're like, oh, that's stupid. I'm not using that. Blah, 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 blah. But if you actually played with those rules, and you might not like them, but there might be something you can gain out of it, right? Same with like, the one-to-one time, for example. Somebody brought that up in chat, even though like we can talk about that later. But all these different things that you would see in these old school games, or like using chainmail with white box, right? And using the man-to-man tables and the fantasy monster tables and all the different tables with white box completely changes the whole perspective of the game. And I think that's an interesting thing to explore. Even if you don't like it, it's worth exploring and looking into, and maybe you can gain some philosophy out of it. But I would argue that, just because you play an old school style of game doesn't mean you have to adhere to a very specific philosophy. I don't really tend to run my games in like a very rigid old school Gygaxian philosophy. I run my games the way I've always run my games. It doesn't matter what the game is. Now, sometimes I want to run a very specific type of game, so maybe I'm going to be like, okay, guys, look, we're going to run 1974 white box D&D. We're only going to use the original 3 booklets, and we're going to use chainmail, and it's going to be a sandbox, and go, this is what we're doing, I'll run that specific type of game. But usually, for the most part, I'm just going to run the game. I'm going to run the type of game that I'm comfortable with running.
Rule set doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter what rule set I'm using. If I'm using White Box or BX or Rollmaster or what the hell ever, Palladium Fantasy, I'm pretty much, if you've played in a game with me, pretty much all my games kind of go I'm always running the game the same way. So I think there's a lot to learn from the OSR. I think you should delve into it, and you might learn something. There might be some things you can learn there, but I would say don't adhere yourself to a specific philosophy. And I think it's good to delve into that and learn something from that philosophy, but I don't think you necessarily have to completely go along that road. You can take other roads, and you can find your own voice, and you can find your own way to run a game or play a game. And you can find what you enjoy out of it, right?
Mm-hmm. It's funny, you actually answered your follow-up question in that too, so I don't even have to ask you a follow-up now. So good job. So we're going to move on to Basic Expert here. Same question for you. In what ways do OSR games differ fundamentally from modern RPGs?
I think there's just a different expectation from the player and the GM. I think it takes a different kind of game to. It's going to be a different kind of game. It's going to be a very much like a player-driven game, right? Where the players are like, "What's in this hex over here? Let's go explore over here," rather than waiting for the referee or the dungeon master to tell them what the next plot hook is or give them that little hook. Like I don't run my games that way, personally, because I don't feel like the rules they don't conform to that sort of game. They conform to a game of like exploration, resource management. I would say those are the two really big things. Like you're exploring and you're like, do I have enough resources to do this exploring and survive and get back to town or wherever safety and reap the benefits of all the things I gained in my exploration. And like combat is part of that. But, if you can avoid combat, that's generally in old school games and especially in the early levels, that's all for the better. Whereas I think like a lot of new school gamers, like I when I first introduced a buddy of mine from 5e into basic fantasy, like he took to it really quick. But one thing a lot of the guys did, because they hadn't played some of them had played old school D&D before, but they hadn't played anything like that in a long time, is they just rushed straight into battle. Like they took on their level 1. There was 4 of them, no hirelings, and they just rushed into 9 bandits. And I'm like,
okay, enjoy.
Yeah. I didn't kill them, but they did get robbed and have all their stuff taken by the bandits. So, which worked out in the end because they decided to go and seek revenge on those bandits when they were a higher level and a little more, a little more wiser, and they murdered all those bandits. But I do think there's this idea of like, I'm going to kick in the door and I'm going to kick ass, and that's like the 5e modern way of doing it. And the game kind of plays that power fantasy, whereas old school is like, maybe I should listen at the door first before I kick it in. Maybe I should, like, I've had players like, can we grease the hinges a little bit? So like when we open it, we don't want it to like creak, you get to that kind of play in old school because you're so afraid of you want to maximize the environment to your advantage.
Yes.
As much as possible. And a lot of those considerations don't happen in a lot of modern games. You can totally run, Sean here mentioned like running 5e that way. You totally can, but that's not the general assumption, I think.
And right out of the gate, when you look at the design of it, it's not designed like that. No. You kind of have to intentionally force. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and as for like people are talking about the bros in 1-to-1 time, like say what you will about them in there, but like I've been running this for my supporters on the Guilded server on the supporter end, and been using 1-to-1 time, and it's been a lot of fun because there's a lot of people that are able to drop in, drop out. I kind of view it as like just ending back in town. It's almost like a more like episodic adventure, and it suits that old school D&D vibe very well, where like the players are going out, they're going into a delve into the dungeon or exploring the wilderness or sending a message to some high patriarch in the church or something like that, or political figure, and they end in town. That's kind of how I view it. And then we're handling downtime stuff via chat in the middle. And I could get better at it, but I'm seeing the benefits of it, and it's been like a lot of fun. And it's been a totally different vibe than when I ran like my 5e games back in the day or my 4e games, and I'm really enjoying those. So.
I love 1-to-1 time, especially as I get older, and suddenly my memory is equivalent to the others' memories, is because the time has actually passed. It's a justification for my faulty memory.
Yeah, it's fun.
I have a differing opinion, but I understand the use of it. I think I even started a comment that said that I understand the use of 1-to-1 time. I'm not anti 1-to-1 time, but it would never have a place in the way I run my games.
What I do is I bank it. So, okay, let's say we're mid-adventure game, our session ends, everybody goes home. If it's mid-adventure, it doesn't make sense to advance the calendar. So I bank the time. And then what I do is I apply all the banked time when they go into downtime for training or an adventure ends or what have you. So suddenly we got 3 months of downtime that justifies their training time. It justifies the time they have to spend to find buyers for their magic items, because you don't just go to a store and sell a 50,000 gold piece magic item. You got to send out agents. You got to find somebody who's willing and able to pay for it. So suddenly when you're advancing 3 or 4 months, it all makes sense. It all works out well. So,
yeah, I mentioned how like it's exploration and resource management, and time is a resource. And so if you're forcing the players to consider time as a resource, it does change the way they play the game, and it does change their interaction with the game world and whatnot. Zero E, for instance, at the end of book 2 or 3, I don't remember, has like a variant on 1-to-1 time. You know, it says like a dungeon delve takes a week, doesn't matter how long it takes, and 1 week of actual time is equal to 1 week of game time. And so if the players are going in and, you know, they want to maximize that delve into the dungeon because it's going to eat up a week, and they want to get back in time in order to play that character again for the next session, you know, like it works out well in changing their mindset as far as like using time. That's why I see it, using time as a resource. And it makes a totally different game. It feels more wargamey, and that's not going to be to everyone's taste, and I totally get that. But
well,
like right now I'm running a mass combat. I took a break from it for the stream, but like I've been running a mass combat with the guys because they're trying to retake a village from a group of like 110 orcs. They got a patriarch of the church to help them, and so they're besieging the city in this 1-to-1 time, you know, mass combat, and it's been kind of fun. So, you know, it has its place and it has its taste for people. I get people not liking it, but
I wouldn't tell people not to use it or anything like that. It's just it honestly has really no place in my games. But the closest I'll get to 1-to-1 time is, you know, if they are exploring something, it'll be like, hey, it's taken you guys 20 minutes just to think about what plan you're going to come up with here. I mean, that's 20 minutes of time that's passed here. But for training times, I'll fast forward to that stuff. Like, okay, you guys, who's training, who's researching spells, who's figuring stuff out, and because we're going to play the next session, which is going to be the next week, you know. So I understand its utility. It just doesn't have room. I don't have room for it in my games.
Well, the other consideration there is 1-to-1 time is immensely useful when you're doing troop style play and everybody has a stable of characters.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as you say, oh, well, character A is out on an expedition. They're gone for 2 weeks and everybody else wants to go somewhere else. Okay, well, I can't use character A because he's out on an expedition. I got to use character B. My current, my Night Below game, my AD&D game, they've got a stable of characters, and one group has gone back to a major city for a purpose, and so alternate characters left behind, and so I've told them that the characters that have gone back to the major city, there's a 3-month gap, so you know they before they can come back to Heronshire where the story is set, and so they've got to look at what characters are available to them until such time elapses. So I think it's great. I love it.
So I'm glad you love it, because I'm going to take the other. I would not want to be in that game at all. I don't play alternate characters. I play my one character until it dies. That's it. I'm looking for, like I said, I'm looking for the Lord of the Rings type experience. Again, it can take time to get there. I don't even like henchmen and hirelings, other than the nonsense. You like, carry my crap. Let's move on. Because to me, it's about the player characters at the table. It's just a different style.
D&D game at all.
Yeah, you hate my game, Max.
No, but
that's fine though. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the point that trying to bring out here. Yeah. I think it's good that you guys do that, because it kind of shows that within the hobby, within even the games that we play, which are very similar, we still have different styles. And there's nothing to say that 1-to-1 time is bad. It just doesn't fit me. And there's nothing to say that 1-to-1 time must be used because it doesn't fit everybody's game. But the follow-up question I wanted to ask, which wasn't about 1-to-1 time, though it could somewhat relate to that, is how do player expectations, because I'm trying to use the modern bent now, right? How do player expectations regarding story and narrative differ between OSR gamers and modern RPG gamers? And I'm going to let Cody go first, because he was kind of silent on the 1-to-1 time thing.
No, well, I don't give a shit about the 1-to-1 time thing. I just elapsed time, however, is logical to elapsed time. So if it's 1-to-1, I don't give a shit. I never thought about it. I just do it. Like, so I don't care. Repeat the question, please. Sorry.
How do player expectations regarding story and narrative differ between OSR gamers and modern RPG gamers?
Well, I think typically you're going to see that there's going to be less of that. I'm going to use this term loosely. There's going to be less of that Vampire the Masquerade style of play, right? Like, it's going to be more about what the players do, and the GM's going to react to what the players do. It's hard to describe, actually, like, but it's very, like the core OSR style is a very specific style of play, and it doesn't really revolve. It's kind of like what we were talking about. It doesn't really revolve around like the Dragonlance style of play, right? Like where it's like, you know, you've got this epic quest to go on, and you're going to go along these beats and whatnot. Like it doesn't.
To be fair, the modules for Dragonlance really sucked.
they did kind of suck, but you know, I think Dragonlance is the good mark for what the OSR kind of goes against, because when Dragonlance came out, it kind of like brought in a whole different concept of role-playing games, and role-playing games kind of changed at that point. I always used like Dragonlance as the mark of when like role-playing games kind of changed, because they did at that point. Even D&D.
we were dirty campaigners instead of role player. I remember being called all that nonsense.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think the OSR tries to go back from what that was. And that's a little bit hard to describe, because it's not really about like the narrative. It's not really about like getting into your character as much. It's more just about seeking out adventure, going on the adventure, doing what you got to do, and coming back alive. You know, right? That's really what it's about. It's not really about like role playing the character or getting into intrigue or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. You can do that kind of thing, but that's not really like the philosophy of the core philosophy of those first iterations of role-playing games, those first generation of role-playing games. And that's really what the OSR harkens back to. Now, you can intermix stuff, and that's kind of what I do. I take philosophies from everywhere. I don't really care about what the philosophy is supposed to be. I take what I like and incorporate it and make it my game. And I think that's the better choice, to be honest. I think that's the best way to do anything. You learn as much as you can. You take what you like, you take the best elements, what you think is best, and you do that, right? Like if you like something, if you're really into something, you should learn as much as you can about it, take all you can about it, and go that route. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Again, it's from your experience and your perspective. I'll ask the same follow up to TBE. Again, this is all just from your perspective. We're not being the authorities on everything. So if somebody in chat doesn't hear, you're wrong. Okay, fine. How do player expectations regarding story and narrative differ between OSR gamers and modern RPG gamers?
For me, story is emergent. You know, this is another thing that Max probably doesn't like, but I'm a zero prep game master, zero prep referee. I go to every table and I'm like, well, they're entering a dungeon. I'm using the dungeon generator from 1E or from I built one in White Box. You know, I'm using that. Or, you know, I'm going to use some oracles that I built for myself, because I build like my own zero prep rules. And, you know, that's going to build the story, how an NPC would react, because I like being surprised with the players as well as how the world unfolds. And it makes I find old school rules make that on the fly reaction to what the players want to do and what they're doing, and making that emergent story a lot easier. There's a lot more tools in that, and it just seems better suited for it than a lot of modern games. Not that you can't do it with modern games, you totally could, but it's just easier with an old school game. And so to me, like, it's not that I'm anti-story, because I think a lot of people get that perception of me and my games and my preferences for running them. I'm not anti-story. It's just I'm anti having a story in mind before I go to the table for me.
Sure.
I'm more just like, you know, what do you guys want to do? Like, and they'll be like, oh, well, you know, we want to talk to someone in the tavern. Okay, I'm going to roll on some of my tables. Okay, here's a rumor that I generated from some oracles. And this is what's going on in the woods over here, but there's also this, and I'm like generating rumors on the fly, and that's all I have is like a rumor, and the players are like, okay, let's go pursue the, you know, these disappearances in the woods, and I have like nothing planned for that, so I just make it up as I go along, and I have a lot of fun with that. My players don't seem to complain about that, you know. My White Box game sessions have been going on for a couple months now with my game, and you know, I've done this in the past with other games to great effect. And I just find that the emergent story is far more rewarding than the planned story coming to fruition and falling together, you know. Not to speak ill of that. Like if people have fun with that, I don't care what you do at your table. Personally, like whatever, it's cool. I'm glad it works for you, but you know, I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun with the emergent story. So I think I think the old school way, that war game campaign way of player driven actions in the world and they matter is super fun. And I think that's a big difference from what a lot of people expect in their modern games.
Okay. Sean, same question for you. Do you want me to say it again? Player expectations.
I know. Yeah, the expectations. I mean, and piggybacking off of them, there is that the expectation of the story, and that you will be core to the story that is being told. I think a lot of players who play modern games, they're coming because they want to play out a movie or whatever, a TV show, and they're expecting their role. They're the star. Everybody gets to be the star. Everybody gets their moment to shine, and so they're expecting the prep and the game to sort of fold into that mindset. Whereas when you play the older way, the emergent way, and I agree, I like the emergent. I'm not a zero prep DM. I have a framework, but I do let the game kind of fold around how the players interact with the scenario. So I don't run them through, you know, a pre-planned story, but everybody, you know, you only get as much spotlight as you make for yourself. You're going to be shy at the back of the table. You know, I will try to check in as a DM, but you are, you know, you have to take some action. You have to be proactive in some way. But there is an expectation for some modern players that no, the DM is the facilitator of the fun, and he's got to check in and make sure everybody has their moment to shine, right? And play the story out, play the beats, have it all planned, have it ready to go. Whereas old school, no, it's like we're all playing a game here. I'm the referee. I'm not a storyteller. I'm the fucking referee. I'm going to adjudicate situations, but I'm not going to tell you what to do, where to go, or how to do it. You got to figure that shit out.
So this is where I get a little different. I'm literally in between all of this, and it makes no one happy. Apparently, when it talks about, because I think
dirty fence sitter.
I kind of am. Well, I'm not really a fence sitter. It's just I balance the two. I think zero prep is crazy. I would never want to be in a game that was zero prep unless that game master could completely fool me that we have verisimilitude with the world. And that'd be a great game master. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying, I would go in very, very skeptically. At the same time, I don't like being railroaded either. So how I do it in my games is I have timelines. Some timelines start at the beginning, like some major ones. I add some in as time goes on and so forth, because I want the world to move and grow. But the characters, you can join the enemy. You can decide to go south and not north. You can go where you want. You can do the things that you want. I'm better at it now than I was, say, 30 years ago in terms of dealing with things like consequences and so forth. I was probably a bit more railroady then, but I want the world to exist around the characters. Are they the heroes or the heroes of their own story? They are supposed to build themselves up to be the hero of the story, so to speak, the emergent story, because I don't know how you guys do it, but I never have an end of a campaign in mind. I never say, you know what, we're going to go save the kitten from the tree and then we're done. Like, no, you saved the kitten from the tree. Well, why was it in the tree? Because the orcs came. Well, why did the orcs come? Because the undead were rising and taking up their territory. Well, why were the undead rising? Because the evil cultists were doing, like, this thing can go on for freaking ever. Like, in my mind, I will just add, what is the next thing? Oh, you defeated the evil cultists? Well, guess what? Now there's a religious war going on. Who knows? Like, I'm just throwing crap out of the top of my head. So there's always small, big, large, whatever. I call them timelines. You call them whatever you want, going on. And when the characters bring them down to zero, they lose. Or if the timeline comes to zero, they lose. If it goes to infinite, they win. Anywhere in between means it's still technically there. You build up enough time to where you could, you push we'll just call it the evil empire back. Okay. You can go do a bunch of side things now. You keep losing, keep making dumb decisions, keep ignoring the world wrapping up around you. Maybe you don't care that the evil empire is going to win. That's fine. I can still run the game even under the evil empire.
Yeah. Your world is a living, breathing, organic world. Absolutely.
Right.
And the players exist in that world, and that's what I love. But that's emergent. You're not telling a story. You're not forcing a narrative. You're saying this is a world, and the world is going to react to your action or inaction. But it is still a world now. And as you say, you make your choice. and I will adjudicate what happens based on your choices, and the dice will decide and everything else. But no, I think that's the best way to play. It's a lot of fun. And then the DM can be surprised. Even if I'm running this monster Night Below, right? And even though it technically has an overarching plot, there's still a lot of freedom, and the players can bug out anytime. Like, I'm not making them stick around. They're sticking around because the leader's a paladin. He has a sense of duty. He's not going anywhere.
Wait, in Ravenloft?
No, Night Below. I'm setting it in Cormyr. Night
okay.
Below is location agnostic.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a Ravenloft adventure.
No, it's location agnostic. Although it takes place 2/3 of it takes place in the Underdark. So
okay,
it has to
my
be
bad.
Underdark, but I've set it in Cormyr. But it's got an overarching plot, but it's not one that it's got it gives hints, because it's also sort of a starter module. It tells players or DMs how to run a game. But it's one of those ones that the players bug out. The events of the villains, the villains will come to fruition. The big bad at the end of it will win. So there will be consequences to the land. Right?
Exactly.
But they can.
That doesn't mean that the game's over. And this is one of the weird things. We got to move on to the next question. I'm sorry to talk about my design philosophy. Sorry. We'll just move on to the next question. I'm not here to bloviate on my stuff. But just quickly, yeah, I generally agree. I think that I'm just in the middle of what would be considered modern and what would be considered OSR, and maybe its purest sense, because I love the concept of being in the Dragonlance novels. I do. And I do give players moments to shine, but they have to take them. I don't just say, this is your moment to shine. You have to use your own noggin to put yourself in there.
And
if that makes sense.
You might fail. Failure has to always be on the table.
Yes. 100%. Okay, well, let's ask the second question for this segment. Again, for folks who have super chatted and a lot of good comments going on, we'll get to your super chats unless it's $20 or more at the end of the segment. I haven't forgotten about them, unless you're Law Dog, because apparently anytime he super chats at me, I miss it. Sorry, Law Dog. So I want answers. We're going to start the basic expert on this one. I want answers from both sides. You can't just say it's only good or only bad. What are the strengths and weaknesses of OSR games compared to their modern counterparts?
Well, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the strengths, there's that freedom there. There's that it's better for sandbox games if you're into that sort of thing. There's that war game feel. There's that feeling of growing a character, of this expectation of contributing to the world in a greater way than I think in a lot of modern games. I would say a lot of weaknesses are you kind of mentioned it. There's a lot. Which one do you start with? Which one do you pick? Why would I pick? Should I just get the Beck-Me box sets or the Rule Cyclopedia, or should I get OSE? Should I get
how many box sets do you have to get?
Yeah, which do I get, Osric or do I get 1E? Which one do I get? Do I get for Golden Glory, or do I get 2E? That's definitely a problem. And there's can be that shotgun blast of content where you're like, I don't even know where to start in this. Like, yeah, a lot of it's free or a lot of it's cheap, but like, where do I even start? The content overload. I think this is just like a general thing, but like I think people are very like protective of their homebrew, and a lot of the clones become like homebrew stuff. So when you kind of say you don't like something, I think there's a kind of, I've dealt with this a lot. There's a lot of people that take it very personally. I think we've all maybe felt that, but
at some point, yep.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not attacking you personally. I just, I just don't like that thing that is in this game or whatever, and people take offense to that. And that's more of a community issue. Mostly online, like the terminally online type. It's not everyone. But and I think that sometimes it's explanation. Like I mentioned, like for me and my games, I kind of have that expectation that if you found my stuff, you kind of know a thing or two. So I'm not, when I write my games, and I know a lot of other games, they're not holding your hand in a lot of these old school games. Like there's an expectation that you have, like 0E. I think that's part of the problem. 0E has been so misinterpreted, like from the very beginning, or misunderstood in a lot of respects, because there was a lot of wargaming knowledge that was expected of someone reading those books. And if you didn't have it, it didn't make sense. And so it's frustrating. And I think that can still even happen with a lot of OSR games today, is if you don't have the requisite background knowledge, it can be a little daunting to understand some things. Once you get that background knowledge, once you understand it, the games are easy and they're a lot of fun. But it's that connecting of dots that sometimes can be a bit overwhelming for people, I think. And that might be a drawback for people.
I want to follow up with that, but I got to give Sean and Cody in case they answer it for me. So we'll go to Sean on that. What are the strengths and weaknesses of OSR games compared to their modern counterparts? But if they don't, I've got a question for you on that.
I'm going to say, I think, and John talked about it a bit, is sort of the accessibility of the rules. And he like he said, unless you have sort of a background in how the old school style was meant to be played, you can derail your game really quick. The idea of running a hex crawl or running an emergent game where the players are in control, they're in the driver's seat, that can be daunting for a new DM. Because you really have to have improvisational skills. You have to have a framework of knowledge of how the system is supposed to work. And not a lot of the rule sets give you that guidance. Whereas with the modern system, at least if nothing else, they are clear. There's a methodology on how everything is to be resolved. There's overabundance of rules, but at least they cover a lot of bases. So you have that resolution, that conflict resolution in place. Whereas with old school games, it's something you have to learn. It's, you learn by making mistakes. You will, it's trial by fire, but it's not readily apparent.
Mm-hmm. You actually pretty much hit on the point that I wanted to bring up, which was, do you think that it is daunting by having Pathfinder's got a rule for everything, which I can't stand. I don't want an encyclopedia that's a rule for everything, but some people need that or want that. And I don't mean it as a crutch in a negative way necessarily, but they want that, like, look, I can define it for you right here, vice the, what I like, which is the framework or the rulings over rules. Give me the framework to make the rule, and then I'll adjudicate it from there. I'm just wondering if some of the modern gamers, struggle with that because they're used to having that encyclopedia.
Well, modern or not, when you're a new DM, you want to be fair. You want to present a game that people are going to have fun with. And if the rules are codified, you can at least fall back and say, okay, these rules are fair. They're codified. I'm not fudging or doing anything. This is according to the rules. It might not have worked out for you, but it is according to the rules. And players, rational players will say, okay, that's fair. Mm-hmm. Whereas with old school, there's a lot of adjudication. And it's very easy to make a misstep, even when you're experienced. I do it all the time. I make a ruling. I'm like, I don't agree with that ruling, but you have to make the ruling and go on. And your players will have to accept it. And fights will start sometimes because you make a wrong ruling and there's no rule to back it up. You're going off the cuff. And so it takes experience to sort of start getting that and making the rulings that are fair and just and keep the game flowing and understanding the pace of how to make the game go. And, like John was saying, he's zero prep. There's a level of experience that's required to be able to do a zero prep game. A new DM, not going to happen.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. Like, I don't recommend you start out doing what I'm doing.
No,
I still screw up all the time, but if you've never done it before, it's going to be a train wreck. So.
I've been forced to do zero prep games because my players have made a choice that I never expected, or they've decided, we're going to pack up and travel to this land. And it's like, all right, so all of the modules I had laid out, the whole landscape, the map I got ready, nothing. I've had to make it up as I go, but I don't generally like to do that. I don't come and say, I've prepped nothing. What are you going to do? I at least, I have my framework, but again, yeah, I don't recommend for a new DM. So that is an advantage of modern systems. And I'll say Fifth Ed kind of gets it right. They do have enough of a framework where everything is sort of covered, but it's still loose enough that players or DMs can learn to adjudicate.
Okay. All right, Cody, same question for you. What are the strengths and weaknesses of OSR games compared to their modern counterparts?
Well, I think these guys have hit on a lot of good points, and I will not reiterate their points. I'll try to bring up some new points. So one, I think, is a good point for OSR games. One of the strengths of it is the freedom and the creativity. Even though we're talking about the philosophy, and I like I said before in the last segment, I think the philosophy is worth looking into. I think it's worth trying out, but I also think it's worth breaking. And one of the things the OSR offers to you is the freedom to do whatever you want, because there is so little rules and there's so little going on there. You're not going to break the rules so much if you try to step outside those boundaries or make a house rule or try something new or create some crazy setting. You know, you can do that with these games. It offers a lot of freedom, and I think that's a big strength of the OSR games overall, right? But you know, I'm not saying that the OSR philosophy is not worth adhering to or looking into, but you don't necessarily have to adhere to that. But I do think it's worth exploring. You should definitely try it out for yourself, but like you can break that, right? Like break the rules. And I think that's one of the strengths of the OSR and where it has gone now, where it's evolved in the Darwinian fashion, right? It's evolved like Darwin said. It started off as this, you know, this is what Gygax said, and this is how it's written, and this is how it shall be, you know, but now it's evolved into something else. And I think that's great. And I think that's a strength of the OSR. It's made us think about role-playing games differently. It's made us go back and observe where role-playing games came from. And it's made us observe what role-playing games are today. And we've come somewhere in the middle and maybe gone off in different directions, other roads. And that's a real strength to me.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was just saying, like, you know, I think that's, I lost my thoughts. So
I'm just going to hit the other side of it. So what do you think the weaknesses of our games are compared to modern games?
So I think one of the weaknesses is, even though I said explore the philosophy, I think people adhere too close. There's segments of the OSR that adhere too close to the philosophy. And, you know, you have these proponents of Gygax and Arneson that say, and so it said in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and Luke, you know, page 71.
We call them priors of Gygax here.
Right, the priors of Gygax, which is great. I think it's absolutely. I think you absolutely should look at what these guys said and read the rules and see what they said. There is something there, but don't adhere to it. Like I said before, I do think there is benefit in what they're doing. I do think there's benefit in playing by the rules. I do. If you want to play your game that way, that's great. I have, but I do think that's a negative and a weakness of the OSR is people try. There is a segment of the OSR that tries to adhere too hard to that extreme, and I think that's a real weakness to the OSR. And like with the strength of the OSR, like I said, is that it really offers this creativity and freedom with all these really loosey-goosey ideas that when you go down that other path, I think it really destroys the strength.
So the people, so to speak, kind of add the constraints that don't necessarily have to be there. Okay.
Right. And it's not everybody, right? It's not everybody in the OSR. Obviously, like, you know, I play old school games. I'm OSR. I'm kind of more in your camp, Max, to be honest. I'm kind of like in the middle there. You know, like like I said, I take all philosophies. I've taken whatever I love from all these games, and that's what I use. I don't necessarily adhere to one specific philosophy. I have, and I still do, run specific types of games. So if I'm like, okay, look, you know, like I said before, I'm gonna run a white box game, it's gonna be like this. You know, like 0 hit points is death. We're going to run sandbox and we're going to do all this stuff. But like at the same time, like most of the time, I'm going to run the game the way I want to run it, the way I naturally run the game. And that comes from years and years of studying role-playing games, studying the history of role-playing games, playing different role-playing games, playing with all types of different people that play all different types of styles and taking what I like and going with that, right? So I don't think you have to. I think that's a weakness of the OSR. Is there is a lot of these OSR people in the OSR sphere that adhere to these specific philosophies, and think they're right. When in the end of the day, Gary Gygax said himself in the Dungeon Master's Guide, like within the first page of the book, you know, the game master is the law. You know, this is all guidance. In the original Dungeons and Dragons, right here in the white box, it says, this is just guidelines. This is our ideas for how to run.
That's going to be a whole new topic that Basic Experts Gilded server is going to go lash out about. Has Rule Zero gone too far? We'll have him back for that one.
Right, but it says right here, like within the first pages, this is our ideas. This is how we run the game, but you can run it however you want. Interpret it however you will. Okay. Inject whatever you will. Like they're you know, do what you want. This is just guidelines, right? You don't have to adhere to this. And it says the same in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide. So I think it's worth exploring those ideas. I think it's worth playing that way, but I don't think you should become so rigid in your thinking that you think that's the only way to play a role-playing game.
Okay. Question. The follow-up question is going to be for all three of you. Jump in, as you know, whoever wants to start it can start it. How do OSR gamers? And again, this is perception, folks. I know somebody's going to be like, not everybody does this. This is just perception and maybe a little stereotyping, but deal with it. How do OSR gamers and modern RPG gamers view the role of the game master? I mean, and I'll be honest, I think both Sean and Basic Expert have kind of addressed this a little bit when they use terms like referee.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I call myself a referee. I'm not a world weaver. I'm not a storyteller. I'm not a world builder. I'm there to adjudicate the rules and have a bit of fun, injecting some things into it. But like, I view myself as I'm contributing to the game world. I'm not contributing to the game world any more than my players are, you know, in a lot of respects. Because if the players go off somewhere on my map that I don't have like a hex where there's something in it, like I can use the 1E DMG or other tables and whatnot to put something there. Mm-hmm. And so the players sort of coaxed me or caused me to generate something for that hex, for example, and it's a dungeon, and I don't know what's in that dungeon, so now I have to use a dungeon generator to generate that, and I'm just like adjudicating these things that are in the rules. Whereas I feel like a lot of modern gamers, and this is a stereotype, but like, you know, I'm a world weaver, and you know, you're all puppets on my string, and you know,
some games literally call the DM the storyteller.
Yeah. Right? And yeah, I'm not here to tell stories. I'm here to, like, I guess, adjudicate a story. I'm here to facilitate a story happening, but I'm not here to like make my personal story happen and the players are just actors in my play or something like that, you know.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the difference of philosophy as opposed to coming with a story planned or letting it emerge. Either way, a story is getting told.
Sure.
But you're limiting yourself if you're coming and you're trying to shoehorn everything into some pre-planned events, as opposed to let's just play, see what happens.
Mm-hmm. So much fun, you know.
Yeah.
But I had these 3 encounters planned out. You're supposed to do this one, take your short rest, do the next one, take your long rest, and do the third one. Well, you broke that.
Tough shit.
Right, exactly.
Wear a helmet.
Wow. Anybody else want to jump in on that, on how OSR gamers and modern gamers view the role of the game master? Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody hit the nail on the head here. I mean, that's exactly it. Like, I think a lot of modern gamers view the role of the game master kind of like how Critical Role views it, right? Like, it's this very like narrative storytelling experience, and like I'm telling you exactly what we're doing and how you're doing it, and you can interact with that, but you can't like go off the rails, right? Where the old school game master is an emergent game master, and that's the way I play, right? Like, I react to what the players are doing, and that's the best experience for a role-playing game. That's what makes role-playing games great. Otherwise, just go play a video game, right? Like, if you don't want that experience, like the advantage of a role-playing game is you can do anything you want within the framework of the rules and the physics of the reality of the game. So, you know, if I don't want to do Night Below, like, I'm like, nah, screw that. I'm going to go off to this island, and we're going to go off to this island, and we're going to be pirates. Well, I would expect the game master to react to that,
accommodate.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's what I would do. I'd be like, okay, that's fine. You guys go off to the island. You're going to be pirates, and I would just roll with it, right? Like, and that's what a role playing game is about, to me. Like, I think that's the best way to play a role playing game. So
Don't do that in my game. I suck at seafaring adventures.
Well, yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. I actually agree that if the players do something, and they always do, it's weird though. And then we'll end the segment with the super chats and the comments. It's weird to me. While you were talking there, I was kind of writing this down because it kind of struck me as I never really pictured this before, but it seems like the role of the game master, referee, arbiter, whatever you want to call it, has kind of gone full circle. But maybe I shouldn't say full circle. It's kind of gone like this S thing because I think it's deviated farther away. Started off as like a referee, right? An arbiter of the rules, as you guys are talking. Then it kind of turned into, I remember this phrase, the dungeon master, the game master is the god of the gods. He owns the world. Everything about the world is the game master's rules, law, so on and so forth. But now it's kind of come back down to, no, the dungeon master is just another player at the table and needs to respect the player's wishes, blah, blah, blah. The mentality behind it is different, but it's almost like it's gone full circle or kind of like this little S-curve thing. What do you guys think about that?
I agree.
I've seen them all. I've seen people complain about or mention that. I don't like the God analogy. I know there are some DMs who like to play God, because there's you get all types in this hobby. People come in, players come in for the power fantasy, and they throw a hissy fit when they don't get their way, and then you get some DMs who they'll sit there and they want to control things because they've got whatever fetish they've got going, and so naturally they're going to be want to cut those down. I kind of sit at the philosophy that the DM is a player at the table. I'm there to have fun too, but I am an authority on the game. I am the judge. So if there's a conflict, I will rule we move forward. That is the rule. I'm not here to accommodate your wishes. I'm here to run a game.
Yep. Okay. All right, let's hit some of this chat here. And Basic Expert, like I said, if you can't hang out for segment 4, I'd love to have you here because it's about the future. But I understand if you've got to go.
I can stay for a little bit. I think my wife will be okay. It's getting close to bedtime for my kid, but he'll be okay.
Understood. And we can make segment 4 kind of quick. I do have a couple people in the background in case you do have to go. So where did we end off with the okay, so thanks again. By the way, if you guys aren't following Squirtle Hermit, go ahead and check out his channel as well. I don't know what he's done recently, but I know he has a channel, so we'll just leave it at that. And thank you, the Edgelord, for making it official. Let's see, is this a new one or not? 5e, look. Oh, yeah, this came up a few times during the conversation in different respects, and I have them starred. But in 5e, look at the character sheet to press a button. OSR considers equipment, the environment, and the other PCs in the encounter. I generally agree with that. You guys?
I feel like that's generally how a lot of people play games. I think what it comes from is TTRPGs. Pen and paper role-playing games influence video games. Now video games are sort of in this feedback loop influencing tabletop role-playing games. And so it's kind of fed back into it. And that's where that mindset comes from. Because for a long time, people going into role-playing games on your computer, their experience was a pen and paper game. And now their experience of the role-playing game is generally going to be a video game before a previous pen and paper game. So
you have a predetermined set of options. Your predetermined set of options will dictate what path you can take. Whereas, so you'll get players at the table, they interact with the character sheet, not with the scenario.
Mm-hmm. I see that so much when I play in 3E games. If on the same kind of topic here, Games Brown Game says, one thing I hate is players looking down at the character sheet, try to find a solution. But I love it when they start to ask questions about what they see in the environment.
Interacting with the scenario. Yeah.
Yep. 2E is bestie. I will die on that hill, and I can argue that too.
I mean, if years ago, I would have agreed with you. I found 1E to be a little more satisfying to me. That's why.
2E's fine. I was trolling on Twitter. It was so funny when I did that. Like I trolled on Twitter, making fun of 2E. and then I left for camping for like 4 or 5 days, and I came back and my inbox and notifications were like out of control, and I was like, nope, I'm not reading all that. So.
I like all of the TSR editions of Dungeons and Dragons. I have the most experience with 2E. I've played 1E. If I were to pick one now, I would pick Rule Cyclopedia. I keep saying that, but I love second edition, and I think it is superior to first edition, but not in such a way that it's like, oh my God, who plays 1E anymore? No, tell me you got a 1E game going on, and it's my style game. I'm in. I'm playing. Let's do it. I mean, 1E does some things that are definitely better, but I know it gets people spun up like 2E. That's whatever.
I love some stuff that 2E did. There's some stuff I ported in, and then some stuff I didn't. But yeah, it's definitely a good system, 100%.
I would play it if someone said, "Hey, John, you want to play in a 2E game?" And be like, "Yeah, let's do it." So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's what I was talking about. With
people, I would happily play in one. I just when I run my games, my happy place is 1E and OSE.
That's awesome. Law Dog for $9.99 says OSR is partly a mindset, and it's hard for players to break free of the 5E modern gaming mindset. As Yoda said, you must unlearn what you have learned. I think there's some truth to that, but tell me what you guys think on this. I think that's true anytime you go to a different game. One of the things I loved about playing games in the 80s, and especially the 90s for me, what I kind of consider the golden age of RPGs, even if I played the games that were written in the 70s and 80s, is that we played everything. If it came out, sure, we had a static campaign of usually D&D at that time, but I didn't care what it was. You named a game. Let's try it. Let's play it. Let's learn it. And it wasn't just one session. Usually we'd play it for a month or so. And we played every week. I love that. Nowadays, I only play 5E.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Back in the day, we'll play some Traveler, or, there's maybe some Rune Quest. But a lot of games of that era, like you can't play, for instance, even the first edition of Call of Cthulhu the same way as you'd play D&D. That's just not going to work.
Right.
So, different rules require different approaches. They're not going. They're not. There's not this. There's not this one-to-one trade that you can. You can just apply. There's not this universal rule. I feel like as far as games are concerned.
And there are games for everyone. I mean, to be fair, what is my favorite game? It's Earth Dawn. It's a high fantasy game that would blow D&D out of the water in terms of its even 5E. There's more magic in Earth Dawn than 5E could even think about. So I don't need 5E for my power fantasy game. But as a concept, though, I like lower fantasy worlds. So I mean, I still have the nostalgia for D&D and Forbidden Lands and whatever other games that are coming out now. But I do agree that it is partly a mindset. And thank you, Law Dog, for the $9.99. Rex Teal. Now we got a couple that push back on Cody, so let's look at these. I'm not completely agreeing with Cody. I actually think going too loose with the rules is a weakness with the OSR. Cody, before you answer that, I got one more.
Yep, bring it.
The problem with what Cody is saying is that the OSR spent 20 years missing the subtleties and nuances of OD&D and AD&D because of that attitude.
Okay.
All right, go.
So I already stated that I completely think you should learn these games. You should read them inside and out. You should learn the philosophy. You should play them the way they're intended. But I do think it's worth going outside that philosophy once you learn the philosophy. A good example, because I'm a musician, right, is you should learn the rules of music. You need to learn the basic principles of how music works. Before you go breaking the rules. You can learn 3 chords and play punk rock, but you're going to play better punk rock if you know how music theory works, and then you can break the rules. So learn the rules, then break the rules, right? I think it's great. I think it's I've played these games as intended. I've studied these games. I know these games inside and out. I could tell you every fucking rule in this. Right? Same with AD&D first edition, same with AD&D second edition, same with Holmes. All these philosophies are great, but what I'm saying is don't adhere completely to this philosophy. Make the game your own. That's the way it was intended to be, and that's the way these guys played the games even back then. So, if you want to play the game exactly how it's written, do it. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth doing. I think you should do it. But I also think it's worth looking into other possibilities is all I was saying.
So basically what Picasso said, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like a master.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, cool. Law Dog says, I run into this a lot when introducing 5e players to Palladium Fantasy or Rifts. They keep looking to their character sheets for answers, and I have to tell them constantly the answers aren't there. See a theme with the commentary here? But it's true. I saw that so poignantly when we played our 3. And I played a bunch of 3e when it first came out because that's what everybody moved to. So when I got out of the Air Force, I played, didn't mean, well, it's going to be on the screen for a minute. I can do it this way. A lot of 3E. So I've played a ton of 3E. And I didn't see it right away, but it definitely just, man, when I played in like 2016 or whatever it was, when we played 3E, everything's like, hold on, let me look what I can do. The other thing I noticed that drove me crazy was like, oh, I've got a +9. I only have a +2. I can't do it.
Yeah.
What? I only have a plus. That's part of the power. So I agree that ascending armor class is more intuitive, but it has its own weakness. And that's the fact, especially if you look at Pathfinder or 3E, the numbers get so crazy. Well, if you don't have at least a +20 to hit, what the hell's the point of rolling a D20? You know, like
I remember playing 3E for the first time, and I was given a character a pre-gen, and I rolled a strike, and it's like, oh, I got an 18. I have +20. I got a 38. And they're like, that misses. I'm like, what?
Right.
What?
Yeah. So this whole idea of when you have bonuses that you can't do something doesn't make sense to me. And even if you have penalties, basic X we was talking about earlier, you might have some penalties on there. So what? You can try. Or was it Sean? Sorry, one of you guys. I was like,
both said it, yeah.
But you can try it. Do it. Yeah, you might. You're not going to have the high percentage chance that the person designed for that role is going to do, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. And game masters, and I've seen this, should not impose extra penalties on you just because it's not your role. Sometimes the ranger is going to fail a tracking roll, and for whatever reason, the wizard figures it out. Mm-hmm. It can happen. It's okay. Move on. It's just the 90% or the 80%, we'll use the Pareto solution, is the ranger is going to be the one that does it because that is his job.
Well, that actually ties back to your earlier question, expectations. And there's sort of, at least in 5e modern players, there's a niche protection. They want their thing, and they don't want anybody overlapping what they can do. You know, the fighter's got to be the tank, and you know, the wizard's got to be the spell or whoever. But people want their thing to be their thing. Whereas in old school, you fucking made sure there was redundancy.
Right. I miss it. One of the things I cannot stand is a 4-person party. I want a 6 to 8 person party. Like even when I'm playing a game, 8 is my max as a game master. That's when it gets out of control for me. My perfect world is me and 6 players. I absolutely love it with a bit of redundancy built in there. I couldn't agree with you more on that. I hate this idea of, we got 4 people, so when one person goes down, an entire roll is dead. Wow. Okay. You know. All right. And the last comment I'm going to read. It's called 2E because it's second tier. No, it's called 2E because 1E had problems and they had to make a second E. That's why it is. 1E wasn't good enough, sir. 1E wasn't good enough. You know what somebody's going to put there? No, it's because they want to take Gygax's name off it. We're just having fun, guys. All right. Well, that is the end of segment 3. I don't think Basic Expert is going to be able to hang up for all of segment 4, but I am going to ask him the questions right away so to at least get his answers. And then we'll let Sean and Cody finish the conversation, but that is going to be on the future of the OSR. Once again, as a reminder for folks, I didn't put my subscribe thing up there, is we will have a giveaway during segment 5. That's the part that doesn't get put to video later, where we just kind of hang out and talk. We will have a $175 giveaway to either Palladium Books or Drive Through RPG, the winner's choice, as long as the winner's watching. So we'll see if the person's watching, but stay tuned for the future of the OSR.